If we're not bringing the food, if we're not bringing the products, you guys are screwed. So you mess with the truckers, you have to deal with it.
You're looking at the scene in Ottawa tonight, where demonstrators are coming together from all over Canada, converging on Parliament Hill in a protest against COVID-19 vaccine mandates. They've been on the move for days, picking up trucks, cars, RVs, and momentum as they draw closer to Ottawa. With some now already in place in front of Parliament, security in the city is tight and the situation tense.
The demonstrations this weekend will be unique, fluid, risky, and significant.
What is certain is that the weekend protest will be big. Less certain is how it'll all play out and when it'll end. Organizers are promising peaceful demonstrations, but police do worry that people bent on violence could enter the mix. We begin our coverage tonight with Travis Danraj. And Travis, you've been speaking with people in the convoy today. What's happening in Ottawa tonight?
Well, listen, what would usually be a very quiet winter's night here in Ottawa, Janella, is anything but tonight. It is loud, it is busy, and hundreds of protesters have already arrived to stake out their spot near Parliament Hill for tomorrow's big rally. Sounds of horns blared all over downtown Ottawa on a frigid night, the cold not keeping protesters from delivering their message.
I'm a vaxxed trucker, and I'm here to support my unvaxxed colleagues. It's wrong to force people to undergo a medical procedure against their will.
What I have been seeing so far is every single Canadian doing what they do and is peacefully protesting and loving each other and spreading cheer and hope and happiness. Yeah!
Just take a look around. We are in front of the Parliament buildings right now, and there are already hundreds of protesters, dozens of trucks lining Wellington Street, and this is just the night before. The main convoys, well, they haven't even arrived yet. Indeed, thousands more are expected by early afternoon. Convoys from the east, west, and south on the road today, all set to converge in Ottawa. The leader of the official opposition tweeted he met with truckers today and says Trudeau should do the same. The Prime Minister is isolating because of a COVID exposure. You're prepared to stay for a month?
Yeah. I got a month's worth of food in there.
At this truck stop about an hour down the road, truckers arrived saying they are prepared to stay in Ottawa for weeks, even longer. They want to see an end to the vaccine mandate for cross-border truckers and say it puts the supply chain at risk.
If we're not bringing the food, if we're not bringing the products, you guys are screwed. So you mess with the truckers, you have to deal with it.
The convoy has picked up people with a variety of grievances along the way. As for concerns about security, the protesters we talked to say that's media and government hype.
We're all doing this peacefully. We all had to sign a contract and a code of conduct. We're all on board with this. This is for all of Canada, not just for Ontario or not just for the truckers. This is for everyone.
And we continue to hear those horns blaring behind you tonight. Travis, what else did you hear from the people you spoke to today?
Well, a lot of the truckers that we talked to say that this is about their livelihood. It is about their ability to provide for their families. Some say that they can't get the vaccine. Others say that this is a fundamental infringement upon their freedoms as Canadians. And they say that they're not going to back down until the mandate is lifted. Janella?
All right, CBC's Travis Danraj, thanks so much. Well, as Travis mentioned, the protest is prompting some security concerns from police, Ottawa businesses, and residents. Hannah Thibodeau was on Parliament Hill earlier and lays out how the city is preparing.
This is the scene from Parliament Hill. As you can see, trucks, tractors, even RVs lining the street 3 thick. And as the protest grew, so did major security preparations. Police putting out barricades, setting up cameras, and even calling in other jurisdictions. And as night fell, the tone of the protest also changed. Truckers and protesters remained peaceful well into the night. But as the scene got louder, the police presence grew.
These demonstrations are national in scope. They're massive in scale. Unfortunately, they are polarizing in nature.
It's making some downtown residents anxious.
It's very stressful, and it's very this is the only thing that's taken up our minds the whole day. Well, the past 3-4 days actually, because of the buildup.
Organizers say they intend to demonstrate peacefully, but police say they are concerned about lone wolves.
We've had new intelligence coming in regards to local threats. As individuals or groups, they may seek to come here physically to cause harm to the city, to disrupt lawful demonstrations, or that may be inciting hate and or criminal violence online.
Support for the protest has spread beyond Canada's borders. A CBC News analysis shows some donations made to a GoFundMe campaign in support of the convoy appear to have come from outside the country. And some of the largest donations were made anonymously. International stars have also spoken out, like actor Russell Brand.
Here's to the Canadian truckers. Here's to standing up for freedom.
Meanwhile, back in Ottawa, businesses 1 block from the demonstrations are worried, especially after already being hit hard financially by pandemic shutdowns.
A lot of these people, as they're truckers and such, they're independent business people. So we hope that, again, everyone is smart enough to realize that they'll be doing more harm than good by causing damage or destruction.
Police have warned people not to come into the downtown core and that this protest could last into next week. Hannah Thibodeau, CBC News, Ottawa.
And today, some Quebecers showed their support for the convoy as trucks and other vehicles headed to Ottawa. A number of truckers in Quebec gathered at border crossings before hitting the road to the main event. Sarah Levitt visited a truck stop at one of those crossings to dial into some of the conversations there.
At one of Canada's busiest land border crossings, the convoy is a hot topic.
I think it's awesome.
This American truck driver says he first heard about the protest on his way through Georgia. He's vaccinated, but he's opposed to mandates.
We only got 40 drivers now that can cross. So it's 40 guys that are going back and forth, and staying up just to keep commerce going.
While Canada requires all truckers entering the country to be vaccinated, the U.S. has a similar rule for non-Americans. The Canadian Trucking Alliance says the majority of those making the trips are already vaccinated, up to 90%.
If you're vaccinated, you protect you and you protect all the other people.
The requirements are essential, says this Canadian truck driver. CBC News agreed to keep his name confidential because he fears repercussions for speaking out against the protest heading to Ottawa.
For me, it's a joke. It's a minority, but this minority doesn't respect the rule.
He's not the only one surprised by the aggressive intolerance for any disagreement. This truck driver with a popular industry blog recently came out against the protest.
I get every hour maybe 2 or 3 really bad emails or messages, and I don't really want to talk about it because I'm worried it's going to influence people to find me online and send me more.
Though vaccinated, Frédéric Bisson is just out of isolation after contracting COVID from a colleague. He doesn't like how this protest has evolved.
While we didn't sign up for that kind of protest, we didn't think it was going to be like that. And now we feel, and I feel, it's a little bit out of control.
So he'll stay away and continue to take this crossing alongside many others. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle, Quebec.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is self-isolating over COVID concerns, and his office has now confirmed to CBC News why. It's because one of his children tested positive for the virus. The Prime Minister said on Thursday he would self-isolate for 5 days in accordance with guidelines from Ottawa Public Health. Well, Canadian health officials offered a note of cautious optimism about the pandemic today, coupled with a warning Omicron cases have now peaked nationwide. As a protest convoy arrives in Ottawa, many have raised concerns about people with extreme views that have attached themselves to that protest and have very little to do with truckers. Let's go beyond the headlines and take a look at what's fueling the movement and whether the message has gone off track. Joining me now is Mike Millian. He's the president of the Private Motor Truck Council of Canada, and Evan Balgord is the executive director of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. Thanks to both of you for being with us. And I'll start with you, Mike. Let me get your take on this convoy from what it started as to where it is now.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me tonight. And I'll just start off by saying, that the PMTC is in favor of people's rights to peacefully protest. It's what makes Canada a great country. In saying that, we have to make sure it's done right, which is, polite, peaceful, respectful of others, and making sure we don't endanger people's health and safety. The convoy itself, even before it hit the road on January 23rd, early on in January in social media, it was purported to be a border vaccine mandate convoy to do with the border vaccine mandate that was coming into effect on January 15th for drivers coming into Canada, as well as a federal vaccine mandate that the Liberal government told us in December would be coming into effect in early 2022.
Are you concerned about the groups that have attached themselves to this and some might say have co-opted this?
For sure. We spoke out a couple days ago. There's, unfortunately, with protests now, there seems to be these groups, and we've seen it a lot more in the last 4 or 5 years, and especially in the last 2 years since COVID. We see these almost professional protester groups that will attach onto a movement and then kind of put their own message and put their own spin on things. So we are concerned with some of the rhetoric that we've heard, but I would like to say that, we believe the majority of that rhetoric is not coming from the trucking industry or the truckers that are involved in this convoy. We did encourage, we spoke out against the rhetoric that we've heard, denouncing violence, racist comments, comparing it to Nazi movements. There's no place for that in our mind, and you have to speak down against that. The convoy, some of their organizers did come out yesterday and also spoke out against it, which we were glad to see, and have told their members to report it to the police if it's there. We need to detach the industry and detach the truckers in this convoy from any racist or hate speech that goes on.
I want
simply place for that.
I want to bring Evan into this conversation. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you know about some of these specific groups who have been involved in this protest?
Yeah, and I really feel for real truckers and for Mike here. God bless them. They've been delivering us food and essential goods since the beginning of the pandemic. Something like 85, 90% of them are vaccinated, and we all really appreciate their service. Unfortunately, the issue Mike raised about the cross-border mandate has entirely been lost now because the far right grabbed onto the idea, stole it, and have now associated it with extremism and are kind of associating truckers in this convoy with extremism, which is not fair at all to truckers, right? Not fair at all to real truckers. From day one, the people who have organized this thing have been what we follow in the far right. The organizers of the GoFundMe are on record making very Islamophobic comments in the past. One of its loudest mouths there, a man named Pat King, has been associated with, the Yellow Vest movement, with the previous United We Roll convoy. There was actually another far-right convoy in 2019 that was extremely similar. They're even using the same posters and propaganda. And, he's made so many incitements to violence and racist comments in the past. It's a lot. And it's not just them. The Ontario organizer of this convoy used to be associated with, or may still be associated with, the Soldiers of Odin, which is a group founded by a Finnish neo-Nazi to hate Muslims. And there's other groups that we're very concerned about, accelerationists who want to violently overthrow the system, who are now also encouraging their members to join. In fact, one of the key figures of that, Jeremy McKenzie, his slogan is "Gun or Rope," the death threat to his critics. So we have not just a couple bad apples involved here, but the organizers themselves and some of the loudest spokespeople for this rally are bad apples. And all of the bad apples that we monitor in Canada, because they are, members of hate groups and so on and so forth, have come to support this rally. So that's the big issue here, right? I think Mike has a genuine point about talking with the government about, these vaccine mandates. I don't have a position on it one way or the other, but it seems like a reasonable thing that adults can have a conversation about. And I feel really badly for him and for other truckers that these extremists have stolen that issue and have now made it so toxic that there's no way that Ottawa is going to bow to their demands.
So, Mike, hearing who exactly we're dealing with in some of these groups, is it enough to say, we denounce this rhetoric, we don't agree with these far-right extremists and racists, or is it time for that protest, if they really do want to have that conversation, to physically separate themselves and say, we're going to go somewhere else because we just don't want to be in the same space or even in the same sentence as these folks?
Yeah, well, and again, just let me reiterate that I don't believe the truckers in this convoy are the ones who are speaking this type of language. They're there for legitimate concerns and their own reasons. As far as physically separating from a group that's trying to take over your message, I think at this point it's going to be difficult. We've already got a couple hundred trucks in Ottawa, and the main part of the convoy isn't there yet. So if they're going to do it, we got convoys coming from multiple different areas of the country that are converging on Ottawa. They'd have to do it on the fly, and then try to make sure some of these groups that may be attaching to them, aren't following. At this point, it's probably going to be difficult.
Right.
I think they just have to make sure that the people involved in this convoy from the trucking side make sure that they continue to denounce and let people know that the trucking industry is not involved in these extremist views.
Evan, really quickly before we go, should officials be proactively, acting on some of the folks who are calling for violence, for calling for Canada to have its own January 6th? Is it too late to wait for that to escalate to that point? Should police be acting on that?
In my opinion, police already should have been acting on some of these individuals a while ago, specifically the ones who've been calling for violence. Pat King, who I mentioned before, who's become one of the most vocal proponents of this, has previously said that, the only solution to, public health measures and vaccines is bullets, right? So we have individuals here who are espousing violence, and then all of a sudden, one day ago himself, individuals like Jeremy McKenzie are all of a sudden saying, if there is violence, it's not us, it's some kind of false flag attack. After, months and years of telling their supporters that there's going to be a civil war where this problem is only solved with bullets, or they need to find their enemies, right? So right. There is kind of violent rhetoric surrounding this, and law enforcement needs to take a close look at it.
All right, we will watch and wait to see what happens tomorrow. Mike Millian, president of the Private Motor Truck Council of Canada, and Evan Balgord, the executive director of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. Thanks to both of you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
If we're not bringing the food, if we're not bringing the products, you guys are screwed. So you mess with the truckers, you have to deal with it. If we're not bringing the food, if we're not bringing the products, you guys are screwed. So you mess with the truckers, you have to deal with it.